So, you just started CrossFit. You walked into the gym and you thought, okay, I'm just gonna show up at the gym and do a workout. And then you quickly realized that it wasn't just one workout written on the board. There were two different options, RX and scaled. So which one do you do? Now first I want to say this, and I've mentioned it in a previous video, that at the core of our sport, at the core of CrossFit in and of itself, it is a very humbling sport. It is meant to humble you. So if you walk into a lot of gyms, you'll see on a lot of boards kind of the rules of the gym, you know, like no kicking over chalk buckets, no cursing at coaches, you know, that kind of stuff. And then always at the bottom or in the list somewhere is usually leave your ego at the door. And I think when it comes down to RX versus scaled and what you should do, that's mainly what it comes down to, is leaving your ego out the door and then approaching the situation from an unbiased opinion. Now, for some of you that may not know the difference between RX and scaled, let me quickly explain it. Probably should have done that first, but I apologize. The difference between RX and scaled is RX is prescribed. It'd be like, this is the prescribed workout. This is what the workout is actually meant to do and meant to be done as. So like, pardon me, if we were doing Fran, the RX workout would be 21-15-9 of thrusters at 95 pounds and pull-ups. Now that's the RX version. So that's the, hey, I did Fran RX. I did it prescribed like it's meant to be done. But then there's a scaled version. So if you can't, for instance, do thrusters at 95 pounds if you're a male, or if you can't do pull-ups if you're a male or a female, then there's always a scaled option presented. And the scaled option really changes and depends upon what gym you go to. You know, sometimes they'll sub out pull-ups for ring rows, or sometimes they'll sub out, you know, pull-ups for, you know, push-ups. It really kind of depends from gym to gym. There's not like, there's always a prescribed, like the prescribed one is always 100% you know what it is, but the scale depends on what gym you go to. Now, the real question is, what do you choose, RX or scale? But real quickly, I want to caveat and say this, that sometimes when it comes to RX or scaled, I get kind of irritated because there are a lot of really good movements inside scaled workouts. There are a lot of good scaled movements per se, movements that you would scale RX movements for that you don't normally do as an RX CrossFitter. So what I mean by that is, for instance, if you can't do pull-ups in Fran, one good substitute is a ring row. But in actuality, ring row is a really awesome tool for developing upper body pulling strength. And to be honest, a lot of CrossFitters don't do enough of it. Like, we don't do enough ring rows. And so what I've come to find out is there are a lot of scaled movements, you know, like ring rows. And so people look down on ring rows like, oh, ring rows are stupid. Like, they're just kind of a scaled version of a pull-up. But if you were asking me and said, hey, Jacob, you know, I've got some time today and I really want to work on developing some upper body pulling, I would probably recommend doing a lot of ring rows over doing a lot of kipping pull-ups, because kipping pull-ups really come down to just momentum, rhythm, knowing when to snap your body and when to do a hollow arch. Whereas a ring row really depends on your upper body pull and can develop strength that can be used in muscle-ups, that can be used in pulling strength. And it's really beneficial. Because that's kind of the issue I have with RX and scaled and the movements that go between them, because I think there are a lot of scaled movements that are amazing and much better than RX movements, but people don't tend to do them. Now, as a real quick kind of funny story or example that goes between, you know, like scaled movements can sometimes be harder than RX movements, is back in the day, you know, we always do, you know, Fran is a common workout to use and to talk about in CrossFit. So I'm going to compare Fran, and we actually did a version of Fran. So Andrew and I decided to do a version of Fran that we deemed was scaled. And so we decided to substitute, we kept the thrusters the same, okay? But instead of doing pull-ups, 21-15-9 of pull-ups, we decided to sub those 45 pull-ups out for 45 ring rows, where your chest had to hit the rings, and they, you know, you could kip them if you wanted to, but it was gonna be pretty much strict. And man, oh man, I tell you right now, that Fran was the worst Fran I have ever done. You know, Fran, regular Fran, pretty simple. You jump up, you knock out pull-ups. You don't even think about it, right? It's all about the rhythm and the kipping motion and your hollow arch. But ring rows, those ring rows in the 21-15-9 of Fran kicked me in the teeth, ladies and gentlemen. There's your metaphor for the day. Kicked me in the teeth. And that's my whole point, is there's a lot of movements in scale that people look down on, like, oh, you're only doing single unders? Or, oh, you're only doing ring rows? Or, oh, you're only doing wall walks? Well, ladies and gentlemen, those movements are really stinking difficult. And I think a lot of people tend to progress into RX without fully grasping or fully really encompassing or accomplishing all the scaled movements. Like, have you ever tried to do a lot of ring rows? Have you ever tried to do single unders? Have you ever tried to do a lot of wall walks? I mean, ladies and gentlemen, wall walks are really, really hard. And this brings me back to my overall point, RX versus scaled. And I think a lot of people tend to look down on scaled because it's scaled, like it's below us. When in actuality, there are a lot of movements that are really difficult. And so I think you need to check your ego out the door and really consider the fact that there are a lot of movements in scale that you probably could get a lot of benefit out of crushing. Because I guarantee you, if you really master ring rows early on, muscle ups are going to be a cakewalk. Because from my perspective, when I tried to do muscle ups, in the beginning, when I first started CrossFit, I had not done any ring rows. And so it was difficult for me to really accomplish muscle ups and get that down. But if I would have started doing a lot of ring rows, I probably would have accomplished muscle ups a lot quicker and a lot easier. So that's my point, is really leave your ego out the door and look at the situation from a 3,000 foot view. Like, take a step back and look back and say, hey, what am I trying to accomplish? Am I only doing RX because I have a little bit of pride, I have a little bit of ego, and I'm too good for scaled? If that's the case, maybe you need to check your ego out the door and think, okay, well, maybe I should just try scaled. Because I guarantee you, if you do a scaled workout, if you do Fran at 21:59 sub out pull-ups or ring rows, it's going to be a whole new world. It's going to be a whole new world of pain. And so that's my kind of advice to you today, guys, is RX versus scaled. Like, take a step back and look at it. Are you doing it because of your ego, or are you doing it because you want to get better? Because there are a lot of movements in scaled that you probably aren't good at that will really benefit you later on down the road. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. We'll talk to you guys later. See ya.